Hello, everyone. It's Naomi Wolf, and I'm so excited to be with you again. And welcome, join me. As promised, I'm going to be reading my essay on Substack. My Substack is called Outspoken, and you can also find it on Daily Clout, about Zohran Mamdani. And the title is Why Don't I Like Him? And the subtitle is Zohran Mamdani's Silicon Valley Sellout Plans for New York, Part 1. So here we go. I started to feel guilty in reacting on social media to New York City Democratic nominee Zohran Kwame Mamdani, to this immediate legacy media darling, this Uganda-born collectivization advocating, smugly smiling, beautifully beard-groomed Bowdoin graduate whose expensive, cleverly packaged mayoral race launched him into our collective consciousness a few months ago out of thin air. I try never to be personal in my political assessments, and I feel guilty because my reaction to Mamdani is so personally aversive. It is aversive because of the lie and deception factor. Mamdani is, as I will reveal, a Nepo son dressed as a communist, but a communist takeover of New York City is not what really motivates this man, not what is really behind this campaign. Apart from the full spectrum communist agenda, which Mamdani superficially offers, one reason for my sense of personal queasiness when I consider this candidate in various settings is because I know guys like this. Though I'm of another generation, some things do not change. I went to school with guys like this. They are Jaspers. Let's call that archetypal guy Jasper. Here is Jasper with a classic graphic Marxist raised fists and the Chinese communist graphic sun rays. And there you can see them, those people in the background, New Yorkers raising their fists, as Stalinist art has had the workers raising their fists since the middle of the last century. Jaspers are smarmy legacy rich young men who never had to work for money in their lives, who have that one darling, costumey thing, that raffish curl over the forehead, or who wear that quirky fisherman's cap or that Palestinian jalabia, though they hail from Darien, Connecticut, and who embrace the cause of the workers, abstractly, or in my day say, of the Marxists in El Salvador. The people, united, will never be defeated. That's for the march on the campus green. Then let's all go have a latte at the dining club. This cosplay lasts just so long before they go back to scooping up the vast privileges of their perches on the better paid edges of the visual arts or of filmmaking, and they let the interest in their trust funds compound. In my experience, when it comes down to their personal well-being and comfort, I have learned that Jaspers will, right on pronouncements or no, personally sacrifice nothing. That's why I was not surprised when the news broke that Zohran Mamdani lives in a rent-stabilized $2,300 a month one-bedroom apartment in Queens. And of course, all of these citations are in the piece. His supporters flocked to defend this situation, stating that there are no income caps for rent-stabilized apartments. Well, that is true now, but it was not true from 2011 to 2019. If Mamdani's $142,000 plus salary, in addition to any other income he had, rose above the cap of $200,000 a year, or if his now wife or another household member was living with him then and earning income over $58,000, Mamdani would have been in violation of the program regulations, which were obviously designed to help struggling middle and working class New Yorkers. Quote, between July 1st, 2011 and June 13th, 2019, the limit for rent stabilized housing was household income above $200,000 for 2 consecutive years, with the rent at or above 2,500 initially, then adjusted to 2,700 and increasing annually. Why am I nitpicking about this? Because it matters. One reason is economic unfairness. The average Queens market rate one bedroom is $4,216 a month. So if Mamdani is now living in a rent-stabilized apartment he secured in violation of the pre-2019 rules, he is saving $1,916 a month, or $22,992 a year. Now, imagine that you are a trust fund kid and don't need those savings to live on. Watch it compound. Watch your money, in contrast, if you need it to live on from month to month, not compound. Mamdani's privileged smarminess in taking up an apartment in violation of the regulations or not, that was clearly intended to benefit people who can't afford to pay more, and then his defending that decision by hair splitting, is typical of how these rich young men behave. The Jaspers are always letting others pick up the check. They are always finding the loophole, the tax write-off, the way around the rules that does not apply to the boring, hardworking rest of us. And their hypocrisy in doing so, even while presenting themselves as champions of the downtrodden, is never, ever, ever, ever evident to them. I saw the same character pattern when it came to Mamdani's application to Columbia University. Now, all of us overachievers heading to the elite universities at 19 desperately tried to see if there were ways to get an advantage in the application process. There's nothing unusual about that. But Mamdani's Columbia University application is a kind of Mobius strip of wokeness, twisting in upon itself and ending up on an indeterminate plane. Mamdani's father was a Columbia University professor, so already his application would have garnered favorable attention not available to non-faculty kids. So he is already privileged as a, quote, legacy. Plus, he descends from wealthy parents, which counts, as Ivies are expensive. But no, he sought to compound his actual double privilege with purported double victimization / oppression. So he checked, quote, Black or African American and, quote, Asian on his application and wrote in Ugandan. The New York Times reported, quote, asked to identify his race, he checked a box that he was, quote, Asian, but also, quote, Black or African American, end quote, according to internal data derived from a hack of Columbia University that was shared with the New York Times. Columbia, like many elite universities, used a race-conscious affirmative actions admissions program at the time. Reporting that his race was Black or African American, in addition to Asian, could have given an advantage to Mr. Mamdani, who was born in Uganda and spent his earliest years there, period, end quote. When the New York Times sought a response, Mamdani said, quote, his answers on the college application were an attempt to represent his complex background, given the limited choices before him, not to gain an upper hand in the admissions process. Quote, most college applications don't have a box for Indian Ugandans. So I checked multiple boxes, trying to capture the fullness of my background, end quote, said Mr. Mamdani, a state lawmaker from Queens, end quote. This is me again. He could, of course, have written in, quote, Indian Ugandan, rather than checking Black or African American. He is neither Black nor African American. But no, and forgive me if I'm getting kind of carried away with the delivery here. It's just that I know these guys. I know them so well. But no, and it is Jasper's language too that sets my teeth on edge with that flourish of the fullness of my background. Do we of whiteness have no, quote, fullness of background, end quote? As it happened, Mamdani did not get into Columbia. He went to Maine's liberal arts college Bowdoin, in which he majored in, quote, Africana studies, end quote. He also wrote several student pieces attacking, quote, Zionists and criticizing his own newspaper for its lack of, quote, diversity of opinion, calling that omission of viewpoints the action of, quote, white supremacists, end quote. He may deeply believe all these things, but New Yorkers who actually are diverse deserve to understand that Jasper/Zohran, who declines to condemn the term, quote, globalize the intifada, end quote, sees their rich, multicultural city as if it is divided into warring race and religious-based factions, not as a melting pot in which we all are individuals and in which we all become New Yorkers. Lastly, there's Jasper's purchase or inheritance unclear of what he calls raw land in Uganda. The New York Post states that Mamdani owns 4 acres of unimproved raw land valued at $150,000 to $200,000. Where is it? No location is disclosed. Quote, a quarter of a century after moving to the US, Mamdani's net worth today is still based in the East African country from which he emigrated. According to the financial disclosures he filed as a state assemblyman in 2023, he acquired 4 acres of land in Jinja, a region of Uganda bordering Lake Victoria that contains the source of the River Nile, in 2012. He lists the land's value as between $150,000 and $250,000. On the disclosure he filed as a mayoral candidate earlier this year, he says that he acquired the land in 2016 and that it remains vacant and unimproved. Whether he purchased it, was gifted it, inherited it, or otherwise is unclear, as is the reason for the discrepancy in the date, and his campaign did not immediately reply to a request for comment, end quote. This is a weird business deal. That's me talking again, because here is what you can get for $144,000 in Uganda. This is the Cadenza luxury apartment building presented by Vaal Real Estate. You can get a 1-bedroom luxury apartment with a barbecue area, track, swimming pool, gym, paddle court, restaurant, concierge, and, quote, aroma garden, end quote. Quote, nestled in the vibrant heart of Nakasero, Cadenza Residence is a living composition of studios, 1 and 2 bedrooms that redefines the meaning of luxury living in Kampala, neighboring several embassies and with the Parliament of Uganda, State House, and the United Nations office close by. Nearby, Cadenza Residence's location in this blue zone area guarantees security and prestige. And there you can see what is, by anyone's standards, by international standards, a true luxury apartment building. There you can get a better sense of it with its gym, track, restaurant, concierge, aroma garden, paddle court, swimming pool, and so on. Leaving aside the issue of why there's so much murkiness to purchase date's huge valuation around these 4 mystery unimproved acres of Ugandan land and what all that may mean in entrusting Mamdani, who was a rapper before he was an assemblyman and who has had almost no jobs. Let that sink in. Almost no jobs. One was for his mom, who has no business background at all, a man who passed only 3 bills as an assembly member and who was absent half of the time, with the highest absentee rate in the assembly, trusting him with the management of the most valuable real estate infrastructure in America and with a $2.1 trillion economy, the largest metropolitan economy on earth. Why are almost all of this candidate's assets still located in a foreign country? I really want you to process that. Mamdani literally has had almost no jobs. And the jobs he's had, many of them he kept for only a few months. And again, one of them was for his mom, famous filmmaker, famous blockbuster, wealthy filmmaker, Mira Nair. All right. Mamdani became a naturalized citizen only in 2018. I want you to process that again. Mamdani, he came here at 7. He's 33 years old. He spent his entire adulthood not becoming an American citizen, going to an American college, going to an American school, not wanting to be an American citizen, not bothering, didn't matter. He didn't care until 2018, the year before he ran for office. Indeed, he is not solely an American citizen now. He is a dual citizen. He's not just an American. His marriage is offshore. His land is offshore. Why would you come to America at the age of 7 and only become a naturalized citizen decades later, just before you run for office in America? If you believe in New York City, why not bring your assets to New York City? If you really care about America, why do you need 2 passports? Why not give up one and just be an American? Just be a New Yorker. Are you so attached to an identity as citizen of one of the worst regimes on earth, one that engages in arbitrary arrest and detention, assassinates activists, restricts freedoms of speech, and has some of the worst laws on earth against homosexuality, that you would rather cling to being a national of that country than simply an American citizen? Why? In only 2023, Uganda got rid of the death penalty in general for homosexuality. But according to Amnesty International, quote, the court upheld provisions in the law that discriminate against LGBTI people and carry harsh penalties, including the death penalty for, quote, aggravated homosexuality, end quote, and up to 20 years imprisonment for the, quote, promotion of homosexuality, end quote. Seriously. I mean, this guy presents himself as right on and a friend of the LGBTQ community, but he participates in this to the point of being a dual citizen in that nation and not giving it up in protest for people being executed or given the death penalty for being gay, right? Or for promoting being gay, meaning like distributing literature about being gay. These are unbelievably harsh penalties, and all of the human rights violations I've seen around the world, I've almost never seen a legal system this abusive and harsh against LGBTQ people. So good job, Zohran. Seriously, Jasper, why not just be an American? Why not just be an actual New Yorker? Are you proud of this? Zohran Mamdani is like a socially acceptable drug for guilty, affluent white people. I remember when I first saw his campaign material, it seemed so lulling and seductive, like a hunk of excellent hashish wrapped up in the trappings of a political campaign. But when you drill into it, it really amounts to free everything. And now I'm reading from his platform. The platform: New York is too expensive. Zohran will lower costs and make life easier. Freeze the rent. And there are ellipses in between. As mayor, Zohran will immediately freeze the rent for all stabilized tenants and use every available resource to build the housing New Yorkers need and bring down the rent. Fast, fare, free buses. Fast and free buses will not only make buses reliable and accessible, but will improve safety for riders and operators, creating the world-class service New Yorkers deserve. No-cost childcare. Zohran will implement, by the way, he's been a dual citizen of Uganda for all of his adult life. Why not make things better in Uganda, right? Like, I'm not aware that he's made anything better in his other nation of origin. Zohran will implement free childcare for every New Yorker aged 6 weeks to 5 years, ensuring high-quality programming for all families. And he will bring up wages for childcare workers, a quarter of whom currently live in poverty, to be at parity with public school teachers. City-owned grocery stores. As mayor, Zohran will create a network of city-owned grocery stores focused on keeping prices low, not making a profit. Housing by and for New York. As mayor, Zohran will put our public dollars to work and triple the city's production of permanently affordable, union-built, rent-stabilized homes, constructing 200,000 new units over the next 10 years. Again, basically free everything. This is me again. The problem is we have already tried communism in New York City and it does not work. Public and Section 8 housing exist already in New York and its boroughs. Families pass on Section 8 apartments from generation to generation. Meanwhile, the projects, which have been New York experiment living since the 1930s, have an unmediated 90-year track record of blight, vandalism, gang activity, violent crime, horrible mismanagement, and decay. Indeed, incarceration and public housing have a long record of going together. A paper titled, quote, "Study Reveals Pipeline from Public Housing to Prison" in New York City found that, quote, "incarceration is spatially concentrated in census tracts with NYCHA, New York City Housing Authority, developments. In 2010, 17% of the state's incarcerated population originated from 372 tracts with public housing developments, even though those tracts accounted for only 6.3% of New York State's population. Compared with non-NYCHA tracts, incarceration rates per 100,000 residents were 4.6 times higher in census tracts with NYCHA developments. Moreover, 94% of tracts with NYCHA developments had incarceration rates that were above the median value for non-NYCHA tracts. And now I'm just going to take my cord and plug things in. Producer, you can cut this in the final version. I just realized I'm not plugged in, so bear with me, everyone. I don't want the electricity to go down when I'm making all these wonderful points. I'll be right with you. And there we go. Okay. The thing is, that connection is not new. This is me again. We have known that public housing leads to crime and gang activity for decades. But no, Mamdani's vision is more of the public housing that has already failed for 90 years. Mamdani's Manhattan, and there you can see an image probably from the 1930s of very bleak public housing going up, which became, of course, still there, became crime-ridden. As for state-run grocery stores, we have seen those in the Soviet Union. Many New Yorkers who immigrated from that tyranny remember the experience of waiting in endless lines for inadequate state-managed groceries. This is what that looks like. And there's a poor guy in the Soviet Union in the 1990s looking at completely empty shelves. This is what that looks like, a Soviet grocery store in the 1990s. And what will state-run, quote, affordable grocery stores do to the 13,000 bodegas or small grocery stores that are the, quote, backbone of New York City, end quote, and often owned by hard-working legal immigrants? Oh, this will undercut them and kill them off. Oh, never mind that, says Jasper. Fast, free buses? You'd think that free transportation is a boon to communities. But in fact, cities that have tried it found that there are terrible downsides when transit is free. If New York City did away with fares for buses and the MTA, the subway, VitalCity.com estimates that we would need to find $5.2 billion from other sources to fill the budget chasm left behind by the loss of fare revenue. Studies show that free buses in a pilot program in New York City didn't, and by the way, it's Zohran Mamdani's pilot program, did not significantly increase ridership by people who are not already using buses. And the studies also found that without revenue to fix the subway and bus network, systems fell into chaos and disrepair. Mamdani has not specified where the lost $5.2 billion will come from, or the billions needed for free childcare, the billions for affordable housing units, the billions for the state-run grocery stores, and so on and so on. Oh, except for a Jasperish calling for an additional tax, quote, on the rich, end quote. Eventually, New Yorkers see through this. New Yorkers can do math. The untruthiness of Jasper is consistent. His campaign was untruthy, as I reported in my last essay, in claiming that a July 2025 poll that was reported as showing him trouncing his rivals was real. As I explained, it was paid for by his supporters, and it cherry-picked respondents. But the legacy media that misreported this poll as a home run for Mamdani did not bother to look at it, as it clearly showed that Mamdani was not, in fact, quote, winning, but was, in fact, with registered voters, the ones that count, in a statistical dead heat with Governor Cuomo. The weird legacy media unwillingness to properly read poll data continues. As I write, a new poll has been released by Siena. It is showing Mamdani 19% ahead of Andrew Cuomo. But there are three rivals to Mamdani: Andrew Cuomo, Mayor Eric Adams, and activist Curtis Sliwa, splitting the vote, of course. Among registered voters, even in this poll, 44% support Mamdani and 25% support Cuomo, 12% Sliwa, and 7% the hapless Mayor Adams. So that opposition to Mamdani adds up to also 44%. Depending on who drops out between now and November and who aligns, the race is not Mamdani's by any means. So the question remains, why is legacy media, funded or owned often these days by big tech, so determined to paint a deceptive picture of Mamdani as the inevitable prince of New York? Is it because he's a communist and legacy media loves communists? No, that is not the reason. It is because, as I shall explain in my next essay, he is big tech's stealth candidate. The communist free giveaways are nothing but window dressing to get the man elected for the benefit of Silicon Valley. Whether he is facing paparazzi with his mom at a gala, or hygienically dining or unhygienically dining where someone's pants seat has just been on the Q train, as if, dude, that is how real New York City people eat every day while on a subway. And I've got to show you this image because it is cray-cray. That is Jasper Mamdani doing something that literally, if he did that on a real, I mean, it's a real subway, of course. It's the Q train that's around the corner where I live. But like, literally, if someone did this, it would be considered so gross, like so gross by everyone else stuck on that car. And honestly, someone's butt has just been there. So I don't know what he thinks he's showing with this man of the people gesture. But to me, it's like, honestly, it's like George Bush Sr. not knowing the price of eggs when he was, being a man of the people at a supermarket checkout counter. I mean, like, you eat your lunch on someone's butt space, on this Q train, Mamdani? I doubt it very much. Nobody does that. Like, literally nobody does that. No one wants to do it. No one would be crazy enough to do it. It's disgusting. It would disgust the people around. Like, it's so like bizarre, but so bizarrely Jasperish. Like, this is a guy who literally, his mom's compound in Uganda, where he got married over the summer, is a luxury gated estate. There were like guards, protecting the festivities. It was covered in the Indian press as a luxury wedding. This is not a kid who needs to take the subway. Whether he is facing paparazzi with his mom at a gala or unhygienically dining where someone's pantsy has just been on the Q train. I read this as if, dude, that is how real New York City people eat every day while on a subway. Jasper abides, but he abides as the stealth weapon of Silicon Valley. The people who are actually funding Mamdani, who disproportionately own or influence the legacy press, who need him to win, see our beautiful city, our 5 struggling boroughs, our roads, our bridges, our infrastructure, even our people, as I shall explain next, as nothing more than as physical extensions of their apps. That is my essay. And you can find it again on Substack. My Substack is Outspoken, and over on dailyclout.io. And if you like real essays with real reporting, this is a densely reported piece, and real writing, I like to say, which is rare these days, please support me over on Outspoken, over on Substack, and support Daily Clout and my team over at Daily Clout, me and my team. So let's see, there's lots of comment. So Pittsburgh Dude 87 says, so you want Mamdani to pay more in rent, LOL, even though he's for a rent freeze for everyone. Well, Pittsburgh Dude 87, according to his platform, he's not for a rent freeze for everyone. He's for a rent freeze for people like him who live in rent stabilized apartments. And the other thing I want to point out is that sounds so great, right? But let's drill in deeper. Many working class, lower middle class people, many of them legal immigrants, have scrimped and saved to buy that one rental property. The landlords in the city include millions of just working people who sacrificed for years to put together that down payment to buy a residential rental unit that they can rent out. It's not all big developers. And it's not like in suburban America, it's developers who build houses. You know, it's BlackRock who's the landlord. No, here there are, millions, I'm going to say, of small, tiny, struggling landlords. Well, they're the ones who can't raise the rent. And you saw what happened in the lockdowns. Among the things that were mandated in New York was landlords were told that there was a freeze on evicting tenants who were not paying their rents, and a 6-month freeze. And that didn't make any epidemiological sense. But the minute I knew this would happen, the minute the freeze was over, those landlords, or the minute the freeze on evictions was over, those landlords evicted tenants who had not been paying their rent for at least 6 months. And then they put their properties on the market at like fire sale prices to be scooped up by BlackRock and Vanguard or hedge funds, right? Giant developers, because they couldn't afford 6 months of no rent because they had to pay the mortgage on the property, right? So please think this through. And the other thing is, I'm not saying that people who qualify for rent-controlled or rent-stabilized apartments shouldn't have them, but pay attention. The restrictions on income for rent-stabilized apartments were removed in 2019. So rich kids like Zohran can scoop up those units at nearly half price and take them off the market, leaving people who really can't afford them without housing. So that is my answer to you. And let's see. Kevin Lynch says, you're all getting him elected. Keep at it. Smiley face, smiley face. This is really interesting. I'd like to see this sorry to say this, but I know my audience really well. And I'm not saying my critics are all bots and trolls, but usually even my critics organically are very thoughtful and not snarky. And they bring up their criticisms to have a good debate, and they bring evidence. And so this is actually beginning to kind of back up my sense that he is big tech's candidate, because these are big techy, bot and trolly questions. No disrespect, maybe you're a real human, in which case let's take it to a higher level. Matthew B says, Zohran is running on freezing the rent in New York, but he already lives rent-free in the heads of every tacky Karen in the suburbs. That's harsh. Let's see, Matthew B says, saying, quote, guilty white people, end quote, with that level of seething resentment is how you know she knows she's a guilty white person, and her whole thing is trying to deny that. See, this is just not my organic audience, but you're welcome to the conversation, Matthew B. Sweet, deadened, beige, suburban interior design. Always love when people who can't be bothered to have good taste skip to the part where they try to have opinions. Okay, well, fair enough. You're entitled to not like my, interior, but I'm in the heart of Brooklyn, my friend, and I'm in a low-income neighborhood in Brooklyn. So I think a lot, and I see what policies like what Zohran Mamdani is proposing do to working people in this community that I care about. Okay, wow, Matthew, you are a true troll. This video rocks. It's like the dullest person in hell had a webcam. That's actually pretty funny. Okay, and lots of snark. So this is interesting. Let's see if every time I roll out a substantive critique of Zohran Mamdani, we get long-winded, snarky trolling, which again is unusual for my audience, even when they're critical. Leah Warner Labrador, wonderful name, says, thank you for exposing so much. The commie can't win. He had minimal votes in this primary. It's all lies, of course. It's hilarious. The movie is great. Howard Turner, interesting, lots and lots of attack comments. In your desperation to monster him, you are helping him. Keep it up. Every hate-filled, evidence-free, knee-jerk RW, is that right wing, post you make is gaining him more support, not just in New York City, worldwide. Well, I'm a lifelong Democrat. I'm now an independent. You may not know that I advised the Clinton campaign and Vice President Gore in his campaign. So I'm not right wing. I'm a classical liberal to this day, even though I walked away from the Democratic Party. I also don't blindly follow the Republican Party. I'm an independent. So that's not accurate. But that's interesting that you call this a hate-filled, evidence-free, knee-jerk right-wing post, because it is chock-a-block with evidence. And I don't think it's hate. I think it's some satire. And yeah, I do hate what I see coming down the line for my beloved city and these people who work so hard. I do. I hate that, but I don't agree that it's evidence free. I've given you lots of evidence, and if you want to rebut it, bring me your evidence. Now, James Green, who's one of our wonderful friends, says, don't you have to be in Congress to get insider information on Wall Street? Let Mamdani bring back cash Metro cards and I'll vote for him. That's funny. And John Ben Sutter says, who is the he whom you're disparaging? And it's Zohran Kwame Mamdani, who is the Democratic candidate for New York's mayoral election. All right, everybody, it looks like we have read all of the comments, and I want to thank you. And I also want to remind you that there's some amazing things that you need to stay healthy. We live in very gross times where there are assaults on our health in every direction. And Netaslabi, another friend of ours, says, I live in communist Japan. Communism is evil. Very sorry to hear that. I thought Japan was a very civilized society still. But communism is everywhere. It's global. It's coming for New York if we're not careful. But again, if you want to make sure that you always have a medical kit in your house, that you always have medication like ivermectin, like antibiotics, things that you may need if the grid goes down, if there's conflict, if there's chaos, I really recommend that you go to dailyclouthealth.com, promo code dailyclout for huge discounts on TWC's medical kits and other products like their spike protein product, the spike support, which I recommend to all of my vaccinated friends. That's still an issue that's with us. And really, I feel so much more at peace, whether I'm in the country or in the city, knowing that if I get a horrible, infection or like skin disease or a horrible illness, that I'm not dependent on all our medical systems being up and running. Anything can happen, we've seen that, but that we've got our own medical kit. And Brian and I use that medical kit. I mean, when he gets a tick bite or when I've had issues, it's so useful to have not only ivermectin but antibiotics for the kinds of things you run into in the country or in the city. And it's kept us healthy. We haven't gone to a doctor for routine visits for, a couple of years since we've had the medical kit. So again, go to dailyclouthealth.com and the promo code is dailyclout and order that medical kit. And otherwise, thank you for your support. You can, again, find me outspoken on Substack. And please subscribe and support me there. And over on Daily Clout, subscribe and donate there. You get the media you support. And this is independent journalism, independent essays, everything sourced with primary sources, not mere opinion. And I hope that you have taken something away that is useful to you. And I will see you actually at 6 with a completely different subject. All right. Thank you all. So good to see you. Thanks for listening.